Welcome back, travelers, to the Planeswalker's Tome, your portal to the realms of Magic the Gathering. Whether you're joining us on YouTube or through our podcast, we're thrilled to have you along for the journey. Now, let us resume our exploration of The Eternal Ice by Jeff Grubb. Chapter 11, Cabal. Revolutions are tricky things, and are best viewed from a great distance, either from the physical distance of several countries over, or from the temporal distance of several hundred years. Both are safe vantage points for the parties involved in the actual revolt. Up close, revolutions are messy, brawling things. Despite the claims made afterwards, the sides are not drawn up like chess pieces, white and black, good and evil. Everyone is on one side or another for their own reasons, and all parties are pursuing their own goals. Players change sides frequently, and often go neutral without explanation. Only when one is far enough away, in time or space, or both, can one truly say what is going on. Both sides consider themselves heroes, and even those who support neither side consider themselves heroes. Only once all the deeds are done, and one side or the other clearly triumphs, can the counts be made, the survivors deciding who the heroes were and who were the traitors. Arkel, Argivian Scholar. Yaya's first stop was at the Sky Knight's barrack. Belinda's quarters had been cleared out, and inquiries about her at the barrack were met with tight lips and curious glares. Yaya filched a dark hooded garment for the Sky Knights, and hit the taverns in the various levels of the city, looking for information. The buildings of Krav were a jumble, an erratic skyline broken by the domed airy barrack, and the cathedrals of the military orders, the towers of the academy, and the squat majesty at the royal palace. Squeezed in around them were innumerable private homes, public taverns, gambling dens, and guard posts, merchant warehouses, and hidden plazas. These later places were the parts of Krav that Yaya was most familiar with, and most comfortable with. Here was a domain where a mage of a few spells and a glib tongue could make a living without having to worry about schools, orders, or greater responsibilities. This was something that Jodah would never understand, something that, until recently, Yaya believed that he had never understood. The low parts of the city were awash with refugees, mostly from farmsteads, towns beyond Michael and Soldev. They were telling tales of the undead raiding their lands, killing their relations, raising new recruits from among the slain. Yaya noted that they told their tales with a fair modicum of embarrassment. They would have rather kept their farms, and fled only when their very survival was imperiled. There was some interest, but not much, for these new arrivals and their tales. Those within the cities were safe and secure, and everyone who was not from the Hinters knew that barbarians were the only true danger to Kajaldor. Moving up the food chain, the merchants' taverns of the Mill City were more worried about barbarian raiders and their fellow impudent Kajaldorians. As a group, the merchants seemed to direct Kajaldorian policy, but as individuals, they engaged in the same backbiting arguing that marked the magical factions and the military orders. Yaya bought a few drinks and listened to the complaints about elf mercenaries in the south, barbarian raiders in the north. The necromancer did not concern these people. The dead don't buy things. Closer to the great government buildings of Krav, the taverns got more crowded, and there were more military men and mages. Here, Yaya kept her hood up, a common policy with many of the drinking parlors, so it attracted little attention. Here, the arguments were over whether the king was criminally weak or merely foolish for listening to the merchants, and which order was most loyal to the true spirit of Kajaldor. There's more worry here about glory than real achievement, and the threat of the necromancer was hooted down, if even broached. Yaya fumed at this last group. They were the smallest, the snow-crowned peak of the mountain, but they were the most influential. No wonder the nation was so divided, and so badly served by those who claimed to be the nearest to their hearts. There was talk here as well of rising desertions, of warriors who were sick to death of factionalism and the king's weakness. More than once you heard of this warrior or that Sky Knight as having gone over. The comment was usually met by a grunt of assent, and the question of who would be next. Yaya assumed they were talking of desertion, but there was something else there. More than just warriors laying down their swords and melting into the snowbanks. There's an open secret among the military, one that she had not been let in on. Or rather, thinking of her last conversation with Belinda, Dana's daughter, she had her chance to find out, and turned it down. She shook her head and wondered if there's a tavern in town with more voluble guardsmen. Her present haunt, the Great Dragon, was filled only with maddening possibilities. Perhaps another venue would provide some more concrete answers. Then she saw Captain Varchild, seated at a table, several upended mugs at her place. Yaya withdrew back into her hood, but the knight was obviously beyond being able to pick up her from across the room. The barkeep brought the captain another ale, and attempted to clear the empties. She stopped him. He led her to drown in the most recent delivery. Yaya cocked her head and counted the empties. Varlchard had been doing some heavy indulging. Could there have been something about the meeting with Jodah that the captain had found particularly irritating? Something that she had to wash out with several gallons of mead? Other warriors stopped to chat, but none stayed. Yaya's curiosity was piqued. The taskmage roused herself, then froze, halfway out of her seat. Another knight had paused by Varchal's chair, and Yaya recognized him from the morning as well. It was the big lug, Avram Garrison, the man who would be general. Another odd denizen for a tavern. Even in the upper city, the huge man bent down near Varchild and spoke. Varchild shook her head. Garrison said something else, his head nodding imploringly. Again, Varchild shook her head. Garrison put a hand on her shoulder, and she shook it off, harshly. Garrison raised his voice, and Varchild half rose out of her seat, her hands straying to the dirk in her belt. Garrison raised both hands calmly, defeated, and left the tavern, shaking his head in disgust. Yaya found that even more interesting, and was halfway to the door by the time Garrison left. Outside, the broad-shouldered knight was joined by two others, wearing the tabards of the white shield and flaming sword orders, one of whom was carrying several heavy cloaks. The three bundled the cloaks tightly around themselves and made their way down into the merchant districts. Keeping to the shadows, Yaya followed. Their destination was an abandoned merchant house off the main road, stacked cheek to jowl alongside a half-dozen similar buildings. The location was amusing to Yaya, and that Belinda had spoken so angry against the merchants. The ground floor was used as a warehouse, with a set of double doors for a wagon, and an outside staircase led to the upper floor living quarters. Avram Garrison and his associates knocked on the double door, and there was a sliver of light as they were admitted. Yaya took the stairs. The upper floors were abandoned, and the windows blackened and cracked. A fire, perhaps, thought Yaya, immediately wondering if a fire was planned or accidental. The door to the second floor was secured, but a carefully wedged jet of mystic flame burned out the remains of the lock. Yaya looked around to see if she'd been spotted. Nothing. She slipped inside. All the activity was below, in the merchant's warehouse, and Yaya crept along the fire-scorched rooms, keeping to the edges near the wall. The last thing she needed was ash dislodged above her quarry's head, giving away her position. There's a second set of stairs inside, leading down to the warehouse proper, and a third set leading upwards. Yaya eased towards a set of interior stairs leading down. There's a light below in the warehouse, and Yaya crept up to the top of the stairs. There's a guard at the bottom of the stairs, but he is watching the others in the room, not looking up. From her perch, Yaya had a clear view of the area below. There were about 30 individuals gathered in the center of the warehouse, an area dominated by a huge brazier of coals that cast red, hellish light on the area. A number of those assembled had already been passing their time drinking, and several were already weaving. Yaya knew the various medallions and tassels and insignias of Kejaldor by heart, and this was a collection of powerful warriors, commanders of their own units, and powerful forces within their orders. Not every unit was represented, and not every commander, but enough to make Yaya worried. At the front of the room was Avram Garrison, mug in hand, lecturing the assemblage. "For too long we have sat on our hands," he said, his voice clearing and stirring. "We have watched as the rot has crawled into our military and into our morals. We have watched as mages have feuded among themselves, and the artificers have dabbled with their horrid machines in Soldev. We have watched as the barbarians in the ice have swallowed our northern marches." He was met by angry cheers. Yaya realized the warrior was playing to a select house, a house that he himself had chosen. Now comes time for new thinking, for a new order for our people. It's time for heroes to lead once more. It's the time for the great heroes to return. More cheers from the assembled warriors. "I have talked to you all individually," declaimed Garrison, making a wide sweep with his arms. "I have spoken with each and every one of you, and know that you feel it is time for a new order, and you have all come here tonight. All save one, at least," thought Yaya, thinking of Varchild in the Great Dragon Tavern. Mug scattered before her. Of course she was drinking heavily, Yaya realized. Loyalty to the crown would not let her come, but loyalty to her fellow warriors did not allow her to oppose what they'd been planning. Avran's speech was building to a fever pitch. "I have spoken, and you have come. And you have spoken to others, and they have come as well, and are prepared for this day. It is time for heroes, for new heroes, and it is the time for the greatest of our old heroes, one who returns. Now, we need to bring Kejaldor back to its glory." Garrison raised both arms, and the knight's associates poured some liquid on the coals. The center of the coals dimmed and steamed. In the glowing steam above the brazier appeared two figures. Yaya had seen this trick before, in a royal mage's reception chamber. One of the figures was ancient, standing stiffly, and was dressed in archaic armor, an ancient helm, and old mail made of overlapping scales. Next to him, and slightly behind the old warrior, was Belinda Dansdaughter. The glowing steam made them look like phantoms. Belinda must have gone over immediately after, thought the task mage. Yaya bit her upper lip. There was something else. The Sky Knight was standing too perfectly, too alertly. too stiffly for her to truly be Belinda. I give you Marton Stromgard, the hero of his age and ours. We are his knights. We are now his order, and we together will bring the nation back from the abyss and to greatness. The crowd shouted first, Cajador, and then Stromgard, at the top of their lungs, and Yaya wondered if the neighbors would hear the ruckus. Perhaps, if they knew it was best for them, they would ignore it. Martum Stromgard, the ancient general, spoke from within the clouds of smoky steam. His early words were quiet and lost in the noise of celebration, but the room silenced, and even Yaya could hear. Have suffered under horrible shame, the ghostly image said. Have suffered the incursions of savage races, and fallen morality of mages, merchants, and machinists. It is time to bring Cajador back to its well-deserved supremacy, and you, my knights, will be my tools for that. The group shouted its approval, but to Yaya the figure in smoke was too stiff, almost a mechanical thing himself. When Marton Stromgard raised an ornate glove to press home a point, it was as if there were strings attached to the wrists. Then he was speaking again. I've been told that the blood of your royalty runs thin, and cowardice hides beneath the banner of pragmatism. I've been told that your leaders ignore the wisdom of warriors and seek only coin, as if gold could keep back a wave of ice. I've been told that your king has erred, listened to too many conflicting voices. There can only be one voice. It is the one spoken by Marton Stromgard. Honor, justice, and bravery. The crowd again bellowed its approval, and Avram Garrison took up for the old warrior. Tonight we begin on a long, dangerous road, one fought with peril. Let any man or woman who shrinks from what we propose leave now, without fear of retribution or shame. He waited a heartbeat. None, of course, left. Garrison continued. Tonight we remove the weak king, so that the strong warriors may rule again. 3 of our numbers, already chosen by lot, will dress as snow-white barbarians and enter the castle. Even now my agents are among the royal guards and will allow passage. By the midnight bell, Cajador will be without its king, and by dawn a new leader will be in place. And I wonder who that would be, thought Yaya. Fate and fortune on our side, brothers, continued Garrison, for the city sees the visit of one of its hated and most powerful wizards of the western coast and his servant, whom the royal mage in her pride and folly has arrested. 2 of my men will go to her cell and kill her as she is helpless, unable to cast spells, and bring the body to the throne room. The wizard will be blamed as well as the barbarians, and the people will rise against them all, and join us in a new order. Uh-oh, thought Yaya, wondering what could happen if they tried to kill the magically made copy of her. Yaya let her attention drift to Marton Stromgard. The old warrior said nothing, nor even shifted in position. Neither did Belinda. It was as if they'd been conveniently turned off when all eyes were on Garrison. Now Stromgard took a deep breath, and Yaya suddenly realized that she hadn't seen him breathe before. My loyal knights, he said calmly, I wanted you to know that I am near to you, both in your hearts and across the icy mountains. I will come to you when Cajador is at last returned to its true masters, when it is supreme once again. Belinda stepped forward, and the Sky Knight said, equally calmly, Our host in this distant land has forwarded a gift for you, a rare cask of his choicest blue brandy. When the midnight bell strikes, and the unjust king is no more, drink a toast to the new Kajeld, and think of our master and leader. There was a hollow tone in Belinda's voice, and Yaya was convinced that this was not the Sky Knight she knew. For a horrible instant, Yaya realized that Belinda sounded like a puppet, like a dead thing, animated for the amusement of another. With a chill, Yaya suddenly guessed where Belinda had gone after dropping her off, and who their unknown host and supporter was. Below, Garrison was given final orders to his assassins. Yaya considered that this was the best time to leave. She took 2 steps backwards towards the upper door. With speed and luck, she could reach the castle and Jodah before the assassins did. She moved too quickly, and her foot landed on the loose floorboard. A squeak ratcheted up her spine, and she looked down at the assemblage below. Most had not heard it, but the guard at the bottom of the stairs was more conscientious. He was tapping a fellow on the shoulder and mentioning for him to go upstairs. Yaya cursed softly and backed away towards the door. Her hand reached for her belt knife. The upper floor is dark, and a figure coming up the stairs would be likely to see her immediately. She bolted for a door to the upstairs. She popped it open just a touch, enough to see that the guard from the bottom of the stairs had already left the warehouse and was coming up the outside stairs, the stairs she needed to escape. She cursed again, louder this time. The other warrior was thundering up the inside stairs, and darkness or no, would see her soon. Yaya took to the other set of interior stairs, up to the 3rd floor, and the steps and rises of the staircase were badly burned, and Yaya prayed they would not break beneath her. The 2 warriors met below her, and conferred in low voices. Then there was a sound of booted feet coming up the stairs to the 3rd floor. Yaya looked around. The topmost floor of the merchant's house was an attic dormer, pierced along both walls by gabled windows. The entire area was open, the walls turned out, and lacked any hiding places. Yaya considered a spell, but cast aside the idea. All the assembled warriors needed was a lousy spell, or a blaze of fire to get the whole group of them up here. She needed to lead her pursuers away, and then abandon them. Yaya ran to the furthest window and shoved it open. It squeaked loudly enough to be heard by those chasing her. She gritted her teeth at the sound. She slipped out onto the roof itself. The tile was shingled with red clay tiles, casting curves. She slipped slightly, but began to climb up towards the roof's peak. She was at the peak when the first of her pursuers cleared the window. He bellowed at her, but now they were far enough away that Yaya was fairly sure the others would not hear. She bit her thumb at the leader in a taunt, and then walked along the spine of the roof, holding her arms outstretched to balance herself. The roof line ran across several buildings, all made of the same half-clay pipes. An evening wind, cold as it always was, had picked up and pulled at her hood and garments with icy fingers. She shot a glance back. The first pursuer was gaining on her. She reached into a secret part of her mind and unleashed a spell, the same simple one she'd used on Jodah a few weeks before. She muttered the words as she had always had, and imagined flinging a small bolt into the man's mind, disorientating him and knocking him off balance. It was a deadly spell for a man perched on the ridge of a roof. The lead pursuer stumbled, then tripped on the clay tiles. He fell forward, rolling as he did so, off the ridgeline. His hand flailed to catch something, but once started, there was nothing he could do. His hearty scream was swept away by the wind, and he disappeared over the edge of the roof. One down, one to go. The second pursuer was on the ridgepole of the roof now, approaching cautiously, his blade drawn. Yaya caught up the same spell with her, and mentally fired a dart, tipped with a deadly portion of vertigo into the warrior's mind. The pursuer was unaffected. Instead, something white glowed at his throat. Yaya cursed loudly. Of course, this one would have magical protection. A rune, or clasp, or something to absorb her spells. She pulled her own thin blade, well aware of how the other blade was at least a foot longer. How can this get any worse, wondered Yaya, as if in response the wind picked up again, blowing with a now savage force. In the back of her mind, Yaya began to feel a familiar presence. Damn it, thought Yaya, not now. Human child, said a familiar and powerful voice at the back of her head. We must talk. Yaya bit her lip. Could you come back in a little while, she thought nervously. I'm busy at the moment. I am not one to be summoned or unsummoned, spoke Freyalise into her mind. I am to be obeyed. Yaya spoke louder. Well, I can obey you as a blood spot in the pavement if you don't leave me alone right now. The pursuer was almost on top of her now, and may have thought her words lost in the wind were a curse of another taunt. He snarled himself, and brought his blade around in a wide, flat stroke. Human child, said the voice. Yaya stumbled back, fighting to keep her own grip of the roof tiles. She said, Look around me, your goddessness. I'm busy. Yaya's attacker brought his sword down in a swinging chop. Yaya rolled out of the way, hanging onto the ridgepole with one hand. She swung too far. Her thin knife sprang from her hand, and went rattling over the edge behind her. Towering above her, the Knight of Stormground stood on the roofline. Yaya considered letting go of her grip and taking the chances she would escape with only a few broken bones. The knight smiled and raised his blade. A savage gust of wind caught him full in the front. He dropped his own sword and pinwheeled his arms to catch his balance. A second gust, this one stronger, attacked him again, and he began to fall backwards. Then a third gust picked him up and flung him from the roof. Yaya climbed to the roofline to see the knight's body spinning end over end, making for the river. Now, said Freyalise's voice in the back of her mind, do I have your undivided attention? Yaya pulled herself up and sat on the ribline. Yeah, sure, whatever. Yaya blinked for a moment and looked around. She was alone on the roof. How are you doing this? I am a planeswalker. I do what I please, said Freyalise. You use my talisman. You invoked me. Now I may invoke you. Wonderful, said Yaya, wondering why the old druid Kolbajorn hadn't mentioned this little bit of information when he gave her the talisman. Have you spoken with your master about arrangement? He's not mine, stuttered Yaya, then bit her lip. I told him you're involved in his rescue. Meaning you did not spell out my price? Typical mortal. Then tell me this. Did you discover what he was researching for Limb Duel? You mean put this mind warp of yours on me when I was just to ask? Yaya sputtered and stopped only when she thought about the attacker blowing off the roof at Freyalise's whims. Yes, I did. He said there were several subjects, including how to kill a planeswalker. Something bristled at the back of Yaya's mind, like someone had left a hedgehog in her brain. And was he successful? Not that he told me, she said, regaining her composure. He was also studying a rogue plane that will be passing near this one. Tell me more of this, said Freyalise. Yaya thought of the 3 men dressed as barbarians making for the royal castle, and quickly said, Only that most of the planes in this area have been separated from the rest of reality for a long time now, and Limb Duel's master, Leshrac, may be thinking of taking this rogue plane away from here, catching it like a boat. Like catching a boat, said the planeswalker, almost sighing. A nice metaphor. But Lestrak is wrong. The rogue plane should not be a boat. What should it be? Asked Yaya. A hammer, said the planeswalker. Remember our bargain, said the voice, and suddenly the heavy presence in the back of her mind was gone, as quickly as it arrived. Hey, shouted Yaya. I'm stuck up here. Hello? After more cursing and careful negotiation to get to an open window, Yaya returned to street level. She had to reach the castle before the midnight bell, which might be 2 hours or 2 minutes away. And where was Jodah supposed to be? Would he be in his quarters? Yaya paused for a moment and started running, not for the Palans, but rather for the Great Dragon Inn. This concludes Chapter 11 of our saga. If you enjoyed the tale so far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on both YouTube and your preferred podcast platform. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, may your adventures be as boundless as the plains themselves. Thank you for listening.